welcome to AI for Good, the leading action-oriented global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by ITU in partnership with 40 UN sister organizations and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. In today's session, we're counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end, as we will hold a 30-minute networking session in the neural network. Here you can meet, ask questions to our distinguished speakers, connect, and chat with the AI for Good community. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Sherry Heinisch, and I'm IBM Consulting Global Sustainability Services Leader, and I am so thrilled to be here today with dynamic leaders and trailblazers who are passionate about driving sustainable, responsible change within their respective organizations and communities they serve. We have here today Sandra McQuillan, Deidre White, Yuan Stein, and also Haynes, who I work with at IBM. Sustainability is a team sport. It's everyone's responsibility if we hope to achieve the UN's 2030 vision. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Deidre and Sandra on many occasions, and it's always a lively discussion. Yuan and I recently met through a mutual connection as part of SAPIX, and I was so fascinated by his views on AI and the future of work and automation. I just knew that he also had to be part of this conversation. As leaders in our respective industries and organizations, I think we find ourselves trying to figure out and navigate how we can energize others about the importance of being true stewards for change in our journey to build a sustainable future. Haynes Cooney, who I mentioned before, my colleague, he's here to provide some perspective and insight on recent findings coming from IBM's Institute for Business Value on what we're hearing from CEOs, how they're prioritizing sustainability within their organizations. I'm so thrilled again that we could come together today to discuss how businesses can create sustainable business growth with a smaller footprint. But before we dive into discussion, I'd love for the speakers to introduce themselves and what gets them out of bed in the morning. Deidre, let's start with you.
Thanks so much, Sherry, and thanks again for including me in this terrific panel. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Again, my name is Deidre White. I'm the CEO of an organization called Pyxera Global. And we really work at the nexus of the public, private, and social sectors, bringing together resources from each of those sectors to drive societal change in a whole variety of manners, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more during this conversation. But I have been personally working in the social impact space for almost 35 years now, long before it was called the social impact space. It's been a really interesting journey in seeing how corporations in particular have changed their thinking on this, on what their responsibility is in terms of social impact. So looking forward to digging in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deidre. And Sandra, how about an introduction?
Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me on the panel. I'm sure it's going to be a great discussion, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm the Chief Supply Chain Officer for Mondelez, which basically makes Oreo, Ritz crackers, Cadbury Dairy Milk, all the kind of favorites that people like to eat, and we consider essential, but also consider the fact that we're going to be snacking right in the right way. And we have a theme here called doing it right within our organization, one of our principles. And sustainability sits very firmly in that whatever we do, we need to do it right. And I see that particularly in the supply chain, given the footprint that we cover and the resources that we use and what we do with them, as well as the suppliers that we connect with to be able to actually make a better world. So for me, this is a great conversation to be part of. Thank you for inviting me. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot, and hopefully I can give something back as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Sandra. Incredible work happening in your organization for impact. And also, she's a champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion too. So wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very proud of that bit as well.
All right. And next, going in order from left to right, I have Yuan.
Sherry, thank you so much. What a wonderful privilege and what an important topic. I've worked for organizations like Accenture, PwC before, some of the local banks here in South Africa. I'm very passionate about my country with all its problems and about Africa. What gets me up in the morning to answer your questions, Sherry, my 8-year-old son is adopted. I love him to bits. What future will we leave him and his his counterparts in 35, 40 years from now, or even 20 years, given where technology is going? That's what keeps me up at night. That's what gets me awake in the morning. I'd love to bring an African, or if you would, a developing country view on this very important topic. And it's a wonderful privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Haynes.
Yes. Thanks so much, Sherry. Yeah, it's absolutely a privilege to be part of this conversation. Thank you to all of my fellow panelists for including me in this. I'm a research director in the IBM Institute for Business Value, or IBM's business think tank. And in particular, my area of focus within the IBV is on C-suite perspectives. We're really trying to understand where C-suite leaders are taking organizations, what's on their mind. And in particular, and relevant to today's conversation, our CEO study from this year, we talked about to 3,000 CEOs about sustainability. How are they actually taking action? How are we shifting from talk, taking substantive action, and where are they seeing that going from here? So looking forward to the conversation. I know we'll all learn a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Haynes. And I actually think that that's a good anchor and intention to set in the beginning. There's some incredible research coming out of the CEO study. I just want to give a few high-level stats. Almost half of the CEOs said that sustainability is, of course, one of their highest priorities, and this is up 37% since 2021. Also, over 80% of CEOs said that they believe their company's sustainability investments will improve in business results in the next 5 years. And I think that business case for change, historically, it has been a real point of discussion amongst the C-suite leaders. I would love to start with you, Sandra, and just to get that industry point of view, and then maybe we'll move to Pyxera to Deidre. What role does sustainability play in your daily business operations at Mondelez?
That's a wonderful question to feed into the fact that it's in our daily business. We've made it our fourth pillar in our strategy, in our Vision 2030 vision. It's very clearly now we've elevated it to a place where it's absolutely everybody's responsibility to do things sustainably. So therefore, every time we talk about investment, every time we talk about what we need to do, both from an AI point of view, but also from a sustainability investment point of view, it's there. And that happens on a daily basis. And actually, if it isn't there, then part of my role that I see I need to do is to remind people, well, where's my sustainability piece here? And I think part of the tension in some of this is we do have our CEO actively pushes and supports sustainability. He wants to make sure that we do what we said we would do externally, and we're tracking to do that. But I think some of the issue is that people are afraid to make the first step in some of these investments because they're so different than where they were before. And sometimes it may cost you a bit more money at the start to then cost you less as it goes into long-term maturation. So I think that's an inertia within the business that we need to keep pushing and overcoming. At the same time, it's absolutely part of our DNA now around what we do.
I love that answer, Sandra. I love that it's everyone's job, that it's within the corporate fabric and DNA of what the brand represents, the values that it shares across its broader ecosystem and within its four walls. Deidre, I'd also love to get your perspective here because I know you live at that intersection of tri-sector partnerships and social impact. What are you hearing from the clients you serve in terms of the role sustainability plays in that daily business operation, as Sandra just unpacked?
Yeah, I would say, I think one of the things that I hear and have seen so dramatically over the last decade is the real change in sustainability from sort of a sideline nice to have to a core piece of organizational strategy. And one of the interesting places where Pyxera Global comes into this, I mean, maybe I'll take a step back and say, we are a not-for-profit organization, and we really work together in partnership with corporations to co-create programming that helps them to address their ESG strategies, or anything in their sort of sustainability corporate citizenship bucket, however they're defining it. So increasingly, we see diversity, equity, and inclusion included in that sustainability bucket. I mean, it's been interesting to me to see how many of our colleagues who are leading sustainability functions have that diversity, equity, inclusion bucket now as part of their primary responsibility as well. But the reason these corporations work with us, or one of the ways they work with us, is in an area that we call global pro bono. And this is where we're actually taking leaders from these corporations and immersing them in social impact programming around the world. Could be in their own backyard, their own committee, their own community, sort of a done in a day kind of interaction. Could be a month-long immersive experience in Ghana, for instance. And what I think is important about this work is these corporate leaders are going out and they're using their core business skills to think about some of the biggest, most pressing challenges facing our world today, and how they might have resources, even their own knowledge, their own skills, their company's resources to address those problems. And where this plays into the larger question of what you're talking about is, these are the current and future leaders of the world's largest corporations, and they are fundamentally changed by having this experience. They come back seeing the role of business in the world differently. So when you talk about a CEO who's all bought in on sustainability, having a core of people who have had a deep social impact experience to really be able to back up that CEO on some new ways and new thinking of how you really make sustainability everyone's job. That's something we spend a lot of our time thinking about, working on, and something that gets us all up in the morning at Pyxera Global.
Yeah, I love that, Deidre. I love the point around shaping the experience and putting empathy at the center of that larger sustainability story. Yuan, I do want to just ask you quickly, the impact of education in shaping the future minds. Certainly, I could argue that that's one of the critical, if not most critical, levers in building a responsible and sustainable world. Can you tell us a little bit about the role that universities play in shaping that larger sustainability story?
It's Sherry, such a good question. I work with 2 or 3 universities, 1 global, 2 local, and then a lot of work in industry. And I often say that we need academics because, in particular, areas like or topics like ethics and philosophy is incredibly important as we go into this future, especially with the smart technology era. But we also need the practical experience of people working in the field, in businesses. So we work with a very particular generation at the moment, our future leaders, an always on generation used to social media and the like. But we also work with a lot of people who are not as connected as people, for instance, in the first world, very important socioeconomic situations, gender-based violence, situations in a lot of homes that children grow up in. So I think there's a holistic view on how we educate our young people to be future leaders. Here in South Africa, we deal with a lot of poverty, and I often say that hungry tummies cannot learn. A lot of our schools are now looking at teaching robotics and coding, and that's very good. But we also have to feed a lot of these children. We also have to teach them how to think. A lot of business acumen or values, if you would, they will not necessarily learn in their homes and communities. So how do we create a holistic whole person who is secure and safe, who understands technology, who understands the importance of the future of our planet and future generations? So, we so easily in the world I live in, we jump on an AI or robotics or a technology bandwagon, and we forget that there's this whole person. So academics should lead us into this unknown future, but we also need people who live in the trenches and work in the trenches, and people who are experiencing the realities of a lot of people, most people in the world today. And I think if we can all come together and combine our thinking, combine our minds to give a holistic approach, I would like to think that that is the solution we are looking for, Sherry.
Yeah, that was so touching, Yuan. I think the combining of thinking and resources and this movement, dare I say, growing a revolution, is so important. We know sustainability, to reach that critical mass, we all have to work together. It's not just one company, one organization, one industry. I do have a question, and I would like to share some of the insights, sort of to go up 10,000 feet around our CEO study. Haynes, I know that you have intimate knowledge of this research, specifically around how CEOs believe that sustainability investments, specifically around certain key areas, can really produce that exponential impact and benefit. Where business can be a force for good. And it really sits at the heart of the changing role of business in society, in some of the fundamental opportunities that both Yuan, Deidre, and Sandra also have alluded to. Can you tell us more about what those specific areas of sustainability that are going to yield accelerated business growth?
Sorry, Sherry, before we go there, is it, I'm sorry, Haynes, but I just wanted to dig a bit deeper in what Johan has said, because I absolutely agree academia can only help us, in education. And I've just recently seen a documentary about Bangladesh, and you look at what's happening in Bangladesh and you go, academia is not going to help us there. So whilst it does in some places, and I know I had exactly the same view, that if there's an empty stomach, why are they going to look at sustainability? Because they just need to fill their stomachs first and then understand what's going on. But I've sat here with this conversation in my head around, we talk about sustainability and we have examples of that, but we don't do anything about it as a global unit, So if we're talking to people today, then there are things that we can do today that may not retrieve Bangladesh from where it is, but it's education. Absolutely. They can't get any more education. They're in it now. So what else do we need to think about? I'm sorry to take us off, but these two things just came together. And for me, I go, wow, how can we come back from that?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant call out, Sandra. I think that also, part of the promise is how business can also create some of those opportunities. Sustainability is not just about transforming economies, like most of us would like to say. It's also about transforming the lives of people, as you alluded to. And if folks are unable to meet basic needs, how do I eat? Am I safe? Do I have shelter? I think it is a very first world view to say, what can we as business leaders, by focusing on digital and modernization and ethical AI, how can we change the world? Unless this is accessible to everyone, including the children you've referenced in Bangladesh, how is sustainability real? How is it really real? What a provocative question. I would love to hear from the panelists. How do we make this real for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think even, I guess I would add to that, the question is around when we're still having the debate over what is too much investment in sustainability. While we're saying it, it has to be throughout the organization, then we're still having the debate on what is too much investment in sustainability. We don't get to real change until what we're investing in true sustainability is actually somewhat in line with our global footprints as a corporation, right? So if you go and look at the sustainability budget of any given corporation and what they're willing to make in terms of investment, and then you look at the larger global footprint, those two things are really out of line generally. So how do we actually say, if we are going to live on a resource finite planet, that the most important investment we can make is in sustainability, and that it has to be aligned with our overall global spend in a much more significant way. And I would throw in one last thing, just as long as we're going for the provocation, Sandra, is we started with accelerated business growth. Is accelerated business growth in direct opposition to the idea of sustainability? Can we continue with this mindset that growth is our primary goal and sustainability, and we have to do it in a sustainable manner? Do we get to a point where growth and sustainability are just incompatible and create ungovernable organizations that can't be aligned along the same values that we want to hold up in our sustainability practices?
Yeah, maybe growth is total economic impact or social ROI. It's not a classic financial KPI. And I think that measurement and yardstick is changing and evolving. So growth, we can get into circular economy and talk about decoupling the consumption of resources. But to your point, both Deidre and Sandra, I think that what great looks like and how we measure that success of accelerated growth, it's changing. And gosh, I don't even know what it's going to look like in 5 years through the lens of sustainability.
But I have great hope for what it's going to look like.
Yes, me too.
Fear, but hope.
Yeah, me too. I think it's, sorry, you go, Johan.
I'm sorry, Sandra. Thank you. I love this conversation because I often think, if you're the CEO of a corporation, because we don't live in this kumbaya Mother Teresa world, and I love Mother Teresa, by the way, because you've got shareholder pressure, you've got KPIs, you've got every microscopic percentage of revenue growth is important. But why should growing a sustainable business and doing good be mutually exclusive? There must be a middle ground somewhere where you can still grow a fundamentally great business, great market share, great shareholder return, and doing good. I think it's not easy, but I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I'll leave it there for now, but I love this conversation.
I don't think, I'm fully with you. I don't think it's mutually exclusive at all. I think we can get a benefit, particularly if brands take on the sustainability element and you become a sustainable brand. Imagine Oreos as a sustainable brand. Wow, the impact we would have is amazing. And I look for that all the time with my marketing colleagues. The bit I sort of am pushing here as well is there's some real stuff going on that shows it's a huge issue. And I don't know how often, I didn't hear on what I saw, I don't know how often we talk about the examples that aren't working, that what's already happened. And is that a feeder into what do we need to do dramatically to transform people's lives into exactly to the place where they've got food in their stomachs and they can be educated? That's what I'm tying all that to, because I think that makes, for me, if this is for a group of people who can actually make a difference, let's make the difference. Let's do that. Let's use these examples to decide what we need to do as a conglomeration of companies and businesses and everything else, rather than individually. And that, for me, I was in a different group of supply chain people, great colleagues that I had there, and we came up with the idea of being supply chain without frontiers, to actually go into places in Africa and do things with our technology and capability to give them water. We didn't get that off the ground. We all moved jobs and it fell over. Well, why did it fall over? Why didn't we do it? That sort of thing, because the motivation and the emotion was there. So that's the kind of thing I was thinking about. Sorry, I've taken up too much time, but I'm very passionate about it.
It's such a great point. Do we fall into the business as usual muscle memory of prioritizing profit over purpose? Yeah. Haynes, I know you have a point of view because we've talked about this extensively.
We have,
Yeah.
Sherry, yeah. And there's so many different points it would be great to touch on here. Try to tie a couple together to get to that point. When we looked at what set apart the different organizations in terms of how CEOs were looking at their investments in sustainability and to what end, it came down to, of course, there was a fundamental difference in terms of some of the foundational things like who has better technology and the capabilities, who's integrating better with ecosystem partners, who's driving incentives around sustainability deeper into their organization. So it's actually part of the organization's DNA, not a superficial project. But something that we talk about in the study as being really essential is actually the mindset of the leaders, and do they see sustainability as part of their organization's reason for being? Do they see it as something around which they're transforming, or is it something they're just optimizing for and carrying on and traditional metrics apply? One of the most fascinating things to me about the sort of small group that we call transformational sustainability CEOs, which is about 15% or so of our total sample set, was when we asked, do traditional measures and metrics apply to your sustainability investments, that those who were furthest down the path in terms of making those investments felt most strongly that they needed new measures of value. They needed to account for new sources of benefit to bring in a more holistic appreciation for how to think about those new timelines. Many of them spoke very explicitly around redefining the timeline for return on investment.
Yeah.
And those who were not investing or were not committed to nearly as sort of comprehensive or thorough a sustainability investment strategy were sort of ignorant, not to be too pointed, sort of ignorant of this challenge around measures of new sources of value. This is not going to be a problem. Traditional measures will be fine. Massive difference on that front. And we see a correlation as well between the sort of acknowledgement of new sources of value and a need to measure in different ways, and frankly, an optimism that there are different ways to measure, there are different sources of value, which leads to a willingness to make bigger investments in sustainability. And we had several of the CEOs we spoke to say, we recognize that we need to be leaping before we have perfect information on every front. If we wait, it will be too late. If we act alone, it will be too late. We need to collectively move forward to take that risk because we believe in the mission here. And that was something that was really striking, particularly, as you know, Sherry, given so much of our research is very quantitative, very traditional financial metrics.
Yeah, I do have a, go ahead, Deidre.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
I wanted to just double click on one thing, Haynes, that you mentioned. We know that how we measure what great looks like in transformational sustainability is changing. The metrics are changing. How much does transparency, that's a huge word. And I know I've had conversations with Sandra about this in detail and Deidre recently. How much is transparency? Like, what does that mean in this new future world and this new measurement of great sustainability, great brand equity, and being purpose-driven?
Well, that's a wonderful question. I'm really interested in what everyone else has to say about that.
Me too.
Transparency is actually where we started this study. We thought initially we were going to get at this broader question through a lens of transparency, and then say, well, let's talk about how transparency impacts sustainability. Let's talk about how transparency impacts other aspects of the business function. And then as we started digging into it, there's a really interesting story that's a little sort of richer in the long-term perspective here around the sustainability specific angle, and we kind of inverted it. However, we see in terms of some of the interesting data that we got back, we asked CEOs, from whom are you receiving the most pressure to increase your transparency, particularly around sustainability? And I think a few years ago, we would have seen a different answer, but now far and away, CEOs are feeling the greatest pressure from their boards, from their investors, and from their business partners. And part of that is to do, of course, with who the CEOs interact with on the most regular basis. But we've seen that now it's the ecosystem is pulling them, right? It's pulling them along into this conversation, and transparency is part of that. And as we look at, of course, different industries and organizations in different industries play very different roles in sustainability. banks, insurance companies, some of these other institutions are really enablers, and they're driving this transparency conversations, and we need to understand how we're going to measure things differently. What is the right way to think about these investments from a business standpoint, from a society standpoint? And so transparency is at the heart of it.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, folks, on this? How do you measure great sustainability and purpose? Is it transparency? Like, what does that mean?
We're working with you, Sherry, on a transparent supply chain. And that's both internally and externally, actually. So how can we feel, we need to get to a place where our consumers can see where their products come from, and they can see every moment of that, because that also means they can trust our brands and they can trust our products. So there's a win. That's where you get the partnership working really well. This is what we're doing with transparency. This is how sustainable we are. We run programs on Cocoa Life, and we have Harmony Wheat. So we're doing things that make sense for that. Transparency internally is really important too, because then you can have the conversations internally with your CEO, with your regional presidents, with however you're set up in your matrix organization, because then you can hold people accountable to, this is where we are today. And I love the comment you make, Haynes, about different metrics being required, because that's exactly the conversation we've had, where I'm like, sustainability won't return in 3-4 years. It'll be 7 or 8 or even 10 at times. If we want to go there, we need to change how we do this and have a different rate of return and a different payback setup, which are the numbers that everybody talks about financially. We're getting there. We're not there yet, because people are afraid to test it almost, because they don't know if they're going to get it through, because life has been difficult in getting things done. So I think back to there's risk aversion in putting your toe in the water. But that's the kind of conversation we're having, exactly that. So I thought that was a great summary that you were making.
And I was going to go somewhere a little different than transparency before we got to transparency. So I take a little step back for a couple of minutes in the conversation. And Haynes, I've already forgotten, and I didn't take a note of it. What did you call the 15% of CEOs? What was that categorization?
We call them transformational sustainability.
Okay, so transformational sustainability. I think what's interesting about that number, and what should give us all pause, and this goes back you on to something you said as well, is I agree it's not mutually exclusive. You can have a great business and you can run it in a sustainable manner. But we're up against a numbers game, folks. And if we only have 15% of the CEOs you surveyed that are in that transformational category, we're in big trouble. And what I've seen in my career, and particularly as this conversation has become more mainstream over the years, is that, for a while it was sort of the same 100 business leaders that were in the room at every one of the conferences when you were talking about this, and that were exhibiting programs, whether it was, shared value initiative or CGI or whatever it was. And that number is increasing, but it is increasing at a way too small pace for the problems that the world is facing today. So the fact that there's only 15 CEOs in that study that are in that transformational category, how do we, the people that care deeply about this, and the millions of others that care deeply about this, how do we accelerate that? Now, that's accelerated growth, I want to say. Accelerate the number of transformational sustainability CEOs. How do we crack that nut?
Deirdre, just to comment on that, I love what we're talking about here. It's very close to my heart. I think especially after the last 2 years that we've been through globally, it's like the village people are no longer scared to walk up to the castle gates with their pitchforks. There's just certain stuff we will no longer accept. We can talk about the Great Resignation, and we debate what that means, especially in first world countries and the like. I just think a lot of people across the world are no longer willing to accept the nonsense, if you would. We have to hold our leaders in politics and in business responsible. I think we are so much more informed due to technology than we were 50 or 100 years ago. And this whole transparency idea, if we think of Cambridge Analytica, the old scandal a few years ago as one example, and who knows what else is brewing under the radar that we don't even know about. But I just think there's this generation growing up that will not take it anymore. What that means would be interesting. But I just think the limit's been reached on corporate greed, on what we're doing to our planet, and what we're going to do for the future of our children. And hopefully there will be a lot more action taken. But I think people are a lot more empowered to stand up because they have a lot more information in their hands. How that will practically play out will be very interesting. I don't think it will be a revolution of sorts necessarily, but watch the space. The next few years would be very interesting in this regards, I think.
Yeah, I love that theme, helping people choose differently and make better decisions. I think that's part of, what's wrapped around this AI for good, the theme that we're kind of here. Like, how do we use technology and leadership and working together to really move the needle? And I started in supply chain similar to Sandra, and it's interesting because, transitioning into technology, one of the first aha moments I had was, you all think supply chains really run on laptops? Like, the digital divide is real. There's so much that happens outside of the system, so to speak. But in all seriousness, the other side of that moment is that how you can really use technology in a way to empower people, like you've mentioned, Yuan. You can use this sort of visibility as a first best step to what's the next action, and include others that aren't just within your four walls, but a part of your broader network, a part of your broader ecosystem, to collectively make better decisions for systems change and really be able to see the impact of those trade-offs, those seemingly small decisions that people make all the way upstream in sourcing and procurement, all the way in product design, that when you look downstream, wow, and you look at the life cycle impact of that product or service, it is part of that big, conundrum of how can we do something differently? And how do we follow the product to the communities where it actually lives and the impacts that it creates in those communities? So I think certainly in my role, technology, it's been eye-opening because I see the power that it can have. Mm-hmm. I also think we still have that access issue that Sandra alluded to earlier. So yeah, I agree. I agree. It's definitely a powerful proposition, but if we had to just, I know that we're almost at time. If we had to just say, like, what is one thing where a leader, a business leader, government, academic institution, nonprofit, what's one area where they can really focus on to accelerate collective impact towards sustainability goals? What would you all say? Is there a silver bullet? Challenge me. Maybe there isn't.
From my side, Sherry, I don't know if it's complex. I don't think there's a silver bullet. My lens, my personal view is, and this comes from a bias and data kind of perspective, make sure that the people who work with you, that think with you, are multi-gender, multi-ethnic, from other parts of the world, if possible. But it's so, even though we live in this globalized world, we've got friends and potentially even family from all over the world, we're still very limited in our worldviews. Bring as many people as possible in to help you think about these things, because we obviously naturally miss certain things that so many other people in the world are struggling with, even though we mean so well. Bring a lot of different people together, listen to their views. And I think from an organizational culture point of view, it's so easy to say that all ideas are good ideas. My experience in a lot of big businesses is that's not always true. Allow people to come up with wacky, great ideas and foster those ideas, and make sure it's ideas from people of different colors, different ethnicities, different genders. That's my 2 cents worth, but it's not an easy answer. Love to hear what the others say about this as well.
Well, and I'll just pick up on that very quickly. We see that, I think, playing out even in our research. Right, is engaging the breadth of your organization and the functional breadth of your organization, the age, you talked about the geographies and other types of diversity. We're seeing those organizations that are doing that succeeding far more often. When you pigeonhole sustainability as the responsibility of the supply chain folks or the sort of responsibility of the CFO, it's not going anywhere. That they don't have the breadth of the perspective or necessarily the breadth of the agency and the organization even to make that change truly transformational, truly the breadth of the organizational mission. And I think as Sherry was talking about technology, I think, and tying that to something Deirdre, you were saying, that 15% are in that transformational bucket, but about 60% of all of our respondents rated sustainability their number one challenge. So if we can position that as a silver lining, there are those who are struggling with having the right capabilities, be that technology, talent, breadth of perspective, the permission to go there. There are a lot more folks waiting in the wings, and I think it's heartening. It's an opportunity for those of us who really care deeply about this area. So we gotta draw them out. But what do they need to be drawn out and really have that capability to take those risks, as Sandra was saying, right? To give them that space.
And I love the conversation around the diversity of thought in this. And I think that has so much to do with why diversity and inclusion is finding a home in the sustainability space more and more. I also don't think there's a silver bullet on this. I would say though, really doubling down on the measurement piece, on the measurement and communication of those measurements piece, because again, I've been working in this social impact space for a long time. It is very hard to figure out measurement and social impact. And then if you're going beyond the sort of more low-hanging fruit, sort of humanitarian response kind of social impact, and you're looking at systems change, then it's a really slow burn. And so how do business leaders find that balance between giving something to their board, to their shareholders that shows forward progress, but also acknowledges that systems change is a long burn. And so, you know, we're making progress and we have to stay this course. And or here's the things we have found out that haven't worked, going to the transparency point. But yes, no one wants to invest in systems change because that doesn't show up on a quarterly earnings report, and that's that's just a really hard piece to look at.
For me, I think my message would be, don't wait for the investors or rely on the investors to push you on sustainability. Spend the time in it. And I love your diversity point, Yuhan. I absolutely agree. I don't know how any decisions on any part of business are made if you haven't got a diverse group of people and diverse experiences and thought processes to go through either. And that's why I believe so strongly in DEI. You just get a better solution. But if the big shift is, let's not wait for the provocation from the external world that's investing in the corporation. Let's look internally at what should we be doing anyway for the right things as a corporate entity, and then let's do them. And let's not do them on our own. Let's find people that we can partner with to be able to make an even bigger difference, because we'll make a difference, of course. If you're a $28 billion company, of course you'll make a difference. But imagine what it would be like if you got $100 billion companies and 28 and 50 all together doing a similar type of thing. And if that's what we could do through some kind of organization, and maybe it's this organization, I don't know, then wouldn't that be a better way of doing it, rather than us all individually worry about how our peers are doing on our results? We're actually above that now, and we're working together to get results for our business and results for sustainability. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't know why the 85% of CEOs can't get together to become 100% of CEOs, to then help everybody to become better, because then we're doing the right thing.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. And what a brilliant point to close our discussion today on, anchored in SDG 17, partnering in purpose for collective action and impact. I want to thank all of you for joining today. I've heard the measurement of what great looks like is changing and evolving. Cognitive diversity is so important. Don't wait for the investors. Get started now. Also organize and partner where you can for collective progress and collective impact. Thank you so much for joining today. And I hope for everyone watching that today's conversation has helped you view sustainability and that transformation lens through a wider aperture. Thank you so much.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learned something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the satisfaction survey, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. We invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits and poster boards, and build your personalized AI for Good program. It was a pleasure learning with you today. See you at the next AI for Good.